In The Dark Side, Jane Mayer reported, to quote a review by Andrew Basevich. This is going to quote Andrew, but it really lays out what she reported. Since embarking upon its global war on terror, the United States has blatantly disregarded the Geneva Conventions. It has imprisoned suspects, including U.S. citizens, without charge, holding them indefinitely and denying them due process. It has created an American gulag in which thousands of detainees, including many innocent of any wrongdoing, have been subjected to ritual abuse and humiliation. It has delivered suspected terrorists into the hands of foreign torturers under the guise of enhanced interrogation techniques. It has succeeded, in Mayer's words, in making torture the official law of the land in all but name. Further, it has done all these things as a direct result of policy decisions made at the highest level of government. So that's Andrew Basevich speaking of Jane Mayer's book, The Dark Side. The country learned about all this, and they rejected Bush's Republican successor, John McCain, in favor of former constitutional law professor Barack Obama. So has everything changed for the good? I'd say not nearly enough. Just in the 2 months since President Obama released the torture memos, a former FBI interrogator testified to the failures of the CIA's so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. A former aide to Colin Powell said the interrogations were aimed at building the case for the Iraq War. A coalition of advocacy groups has launched a campaign to disbar 12 former Bush administration attorneys. The Obama response, while continuing to preach move forward, don't look back when it comes to investigation or prosecution of possible crimes committed in pursuit of those policies, the Obama administration has withheld photos of detainee abuse, defended the military tribunal system, and floated plans for a system of preventive detention for accused terrorists. We'll talk about the past, the present, and the future of the actions and crimes committed by the U.S. government to defend us from terror with Jane Mayer. She's currently a Washington-based staff writer for The New Yorker, specializing in political investigative reporting. Before that, she was a senior writer, front-page editor for the Wall Street Journal, as well as the journal's first female White House correspondent. She's the co-author of two best-selling books, Landslide, The Unmaking of the President, 1984 to 1988, and Strange Justice, The Selling of Clarence Thomas. Her latest book, The Dark Side, is just out in paperback, and as I said, she will be appearing tonight at 7 p.m. at the Central Library, which is at 5th and Flower Streets downtown. And this is a part of the Allowed program. Now, I know that this particular event, though free, is full. That is, enough people have made reservations that it is currently full. But if you go early and stand, some people always get in, because in L.A., the thought of driving downtown always keeps some people away. Okay? Jane Mayer, welcome.
Well, great to be with you.
Thank you. Before we get into all the big stuff, you were at the Wall Street Journal for several years, their first female White House correspondent. First question, how different is the rest of the paper from the editorial page?
Oh, incredibly different. I mean, I don't know if that's still true. I was there quite a long time ago. But in the old days, anyway, there was a complete separation between church and state, between the news and the editorial page. So, I mean, it was one of the best examples of that is when I wrote a book that was fairly scathing about Clarence Thomas. The news side ran an excerpt from the book while the editorial page denounced the book. So, you know, they had opposite points of view.
Good. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
And according to what you just said, I was going to say, and what do you notice? I mean, you're down in Washington now and so on, but do you notice differences in your old paper now that Rupert Murdoch is in charge?
You know, I have to admit I don't read it as faithfully anymore. So certainly the editorial page is just as right-wing as ever. And the news pages, they seem to actually be more eclectic generally.
Yeah, well, they're newsier.
Yeah, not so much, but not just business, but they're doing
right.
more.
Rupert is a scoop guy.
He is, yeah.
And the Wall Street Journal used to be an in-depth paper, except for the business news.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, one thing that is true about the change is that they're doing fewer really long, in-depth pieces. You know, it's getting harder and harder to find that kind of journalism
and that was
anywhere.
Except at the New Yorker.
At the New Yorker, right.
Okay. So I had trouble finding out. Has the government released the 2004 report on the CIA's interrogation practices by former Inspector General Helgerson? They haven't.
That's the answer. No, they haven't. They keep delaying it.
Because it was supposed to come out the 19th, and then there was news everywhere. It's going to be next week or the end of the week, and here we are at the end of June.
The latest word is it comes out tomorrow.
Oh.
We will see. I don't know, because they've delayed it several times already. But it's said to be, a report that's got some real explosive news in it. So I'm looking forward to finally getting a chance to read it.
Yeah, and the parts they don't redact, huh?
Well, this is the problem. Even if they do let it out, it's likely to be heavily redacted still. So, but it is a report that changed a lot of minds inside even the Bush administration about the whole program of detention and interrogation that they set up, because it was filled with details that were really sort of stomach-turning about what was going on in this program. And instead of just using euphemisms like enhanced interrogation techniques, it described what was really happening to people.
How did you end up focusing on this story? And by that I mean, the New Yorker, how much latitude do you have? Is this, right in your wheelhouse, or did something in other words, we know Seymour Hersh, he kind of does the same sort of story. And how did this series of stories and then this book come about?
I kind of fell into it, really. And in fact, an editor said that he had heard something about the Extraordinary Rendition Program. So I started looking into it. That's the program that the CIA ran, where they abducted terror suspects around the world and delivered them to other countries to be interrogated. And it turned out, in many cases, brutalized in ways that would not have been legal in the U.S. And so I started looking into that, and really one thing led to the next. I mean, it became an amazing obsession to cover this subject, because it was like some kind of living in some sort of Robert Ludlum thriller or something. I could not believe that these programs were really programs of the United States government, that we had officials who went to work wearing black ski masks on their faces so that no one would know who they were, and that they were, grabbing people, stripping them, and tormenting them in a program designed to make them just psychically and physically fall apart. It just so it kind of just got a life of its own.
In other words, I can hear what you're saying is that you go, okay, I'll look into this extraordinary rendition program, and you find something out and more, and then it's like you can't believe what you're discovering.
I couldn't believe it. And I mean, and all it took was asking a few obvious questions. I mean, one of them was after Abu Ghraib. You may remember when those photos came out, the government said, well, this was just the rogue actions of a few, rotten apples at the bottom of the barrel, or whatever cliche you want to use. But I was looking around as a reporter and noticing all over the world, wherever the U.S. was holding prisoners in the war on terror, they were being treated in the same really bizarre and objectionable ways. They were being hooded. They were being chained up in stress positions. There were dogs present in most of these cases.
Dogs have particularly, they are fearful to anyone, but they're specific. They have a deeper meaning in that region of the world.
Very disliked in the Arab world, yeah. So
it was not only fear, but it was also a cultural invasion.
Playing on cultural, stereotypes, and people were being subjected to weird music. The New York Times ran a story saying that cat food commercials were being played to prisoners so that they'd have to listen to the sound of meow, 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 meow over and over again, and babies crying were being played. And I just thought, this is just impossible that every soldier in America is coming up with the same weird treatment for what to do with prisoners. There had to be a rule book. So I went to the Pentagon and started reporting, and I actually almost fell into this again. I asked the top Pentagon official in charge of health programs, where are the psychologists coming from that are designing these techniques? And he said, it's a program that has an acronym. It has something to do with survival and evasion. And I said, what do you mean? And he said he couldn't remember the rest of it. So I went back to my desk and I Googled survival and evasion, and up popped this very strange secret program that is a training program for the special forces that is a program that models itself on communist and Nazi torture techniques. And it's a program we use as training for our own troops who might be in danger of being captured. We give them a little taste of torture so that they can train themselves against how to resist it. But the people who designed that program, amazingly enough, reverse engineered it, and it became the playbook for America.
Yeah, what's so interesting is that I kept waiting for you to say almost that we train our troops to get a sense of it just in case they were to fall in the hands of a country so off the conventional map that they would do these things.
Countries, I mean, these were literally techniques that were used by North Korea in the Korean-American War. I mean, these are things that the irony is these techniques were used specifically to get false confessions out of people, not to get the truth from people. They brutalized people to the point where they just fell apart and would say anything. And somehow, you know, I mean, and this the story I tell in The Dark Side. There were psychologists who ran this training program. I named them in the book. I interviewed one of them, who the CIA hired right after 9/11 to design our own interrogation program. And the next thing that happened was we were using these techniques that we'd considered criminal, immoral, unethical, just, you know, the worst of our enemies' tactics, and we were using them ourselves. So that is sort of the beginning of it. Anyway, and that was another story. They just kept coming. You know, all I could say is you just kept turning around, and every place I looked, there was another sort of, you know, mind-boggling story.
How is Leon Panetta doing?
Well, he's got a tough job. They brought him in. He's not an experienced intelligence officer. He's a politician, really.
And let me just, for anyone who's missed this, Leon Panetta, former California congressman, former cabinet member, but someone with no experience in the intelligence community or much in the military community, is the head of the CIA in the Obama administration.
Right. And so I think the thing that is, to me, most problematical is there's been no accountability inside the CIA for the torture program. The people who designed the program and ran it, many of them are still there. And so Leon Panetta, who was picked partly because he has a reputation for integrity and has been an outspoken opponent of torture, he is presiding over a bureaucracy where people were involved in this program, and nobody's, in many cases, they haven't even had their wrists slapped for it. So it's an awkward situation, sort of, to say the least. He did, I'm glad to say, cancel the contract with those seer psychologists, the ones that designed the torture program. And he was very happy the day I went in to interview him. He said he'd also saved a lot of money by doing that. So they've canceled that program, and they've canceled the psychologists, and they there's a new law that says the CIA can not use contractors to interrogate people.
Okay, let me see if I've got it right about some other things. One is that the key point in some of what you said was that the people that ran and designed these programs have not been punished. An awful lot of the people who actually did the interrogation are gone. I read that.
The actual interrogations, yeah, those people are gone. But the
number two guy, Kappas, and
yes, and there was another person who was chief of staff to George Tenet, the former director of the CIA. His name is John Brennan.
Right,
and
those two.
He's now advising Obama. He's in the White House and the National Security Council. And, you know, friends of his say that he was an internal critic of these programs. And they'll say that about Stephen Kappas, the number two at the CIA now, too, the deputy. Yet, whatever you want to say about what their position was internally, they went along with it, and they went along with it and helped make it happen.
Right. And I mean, there is the possibility of coming forward, even at a place like the CIA, of resigning, of threatening to resign. There are ways to really be critical of a program.
People left the CIA because of this, and so these are what's interesting to me is that Obama's got people advising him who did not leave the CIA.
Not only have they not been punished, but they've
risen in power.
They've
really
risen in power.
Right.
And part of that, I was going to say, in terms of the politics that we're talking about, small p politics of that, is that Panetta comes in with no experience. I think I've even heard you say in interviews, he's got to build up loyalty before he can.
That's what I've heard people say that too. I'm not sure I've said it because I'm not sure I even believe it. I think
so. Maybe you were saying what you hear is
people say that in order to win over the building inside the CIA, he's got to take their side in a number of things and protect them. And I do understand the argument, but you could also argue that he could win their attention and respect if he came in and said, a few heads are going to roll here, and we're going to open up the books and really look at this and see what happened, because we don't want to ever do it again. He did actually, to his credit, he supported this whole idea of a truth commission.
Right, at first.
Yeah, and he was pushing for it inside the White House and suggested it to Obama, but Obama's political advisors backed Obama off of it. And I think Obama's instinct may have been to go for a truth commission as well. But basically, the political people around Obama think this thing is just plain quicksand politically, where they're going to get into it. It's not their problem. It's Bush's problem. They don't want to sink in Bush's mess. They want to move forward on their own agenda, which includes things like health care and fixing this economy. And, I'm sympathetic. You can understand it. But I actually think that these issues about accountability for torture are just not going to go away. So they would be smarter to set up some sort of process here, I think.
Yeah, in other words, one of the things I think you've also said is that they're sort of pushing it down the road. Like, we'll deal with healthcare, we'll deal with economy, we'll deal with this energy thing, and then we'll deal with it. But what happens is, at press conferences, he gets question after question about when are you going to release the photos, when are you going to do this?
Right. It's not, they thought it would be a distraction if they opened it up. In fact, it's a distraction because they have not opened it up. And the problem is, I think they want to take a neutral pose, but there really isn't neutral territory. Either you open it up or you cover it up. And that's the problem. They're kind of caught trying to say we're going to fix it and then we don't want to look back. But there are too many sort of things crawling around under the rocks for them to kind of just move on and make a clean break.
So what I heard you say there is, if you don't, then you are involved in cover-up by your passivity.
And every day you see an example. So that basically we're just talking about the Inspector General's report from 2004, where inside the CIA, the Inspector General wrote a scathing report about the torture program. Obama's got to make a decision about whether or not he releases this publicly. Now, the CIA will not want him to because they don't want their dirty linen hanging out there for everybody to see. But at the same time, he's spoken up in favor of transparency, and he doesn't want to have to cover up Bush's, messes. And so it's a constant dilemma, and it would be smarter, I think, if they had set up some kind of bipartisan panel, and they could say the panel's studying this. They're going to work on it. They'll decide about the report. They'll let it out. It's not, they can delegate it that way.
Yeah, what you're saying, is that if they just made that one decision, then we're not going to talk about that today would have a reason. We're not going to talk about that today because the commission's at work.
Right.
Rather than we're not going to talk about that today because we don't want to.
But I think, Obama's whole approach to politics is very much not one of blame, casting blame or looking petty or vengeful in any way. And so he sees this, or he's been convinced that this would be in some ways just not helpful, not helpful to the country and not helpful to himself politically. I think, in that instance, I disagree with him because I think it's really helpful to the country to face the facts. And I think all these things were done in the name of the United States people, and people have a right to know what was done in their name. So I hope that in some way or another things are opened up.
Yeah, let me read a couple of quotes from, I think this is actually from some interviews you've done or some of your recent articles. He has said that Attorney General Holder should be the one to decide whether to take criminal action. He's also said he would support further congressional investigation as long as it was done in a bipartisan manner, and at the same time signaled he doesn't want looking backwards. When he says Holder will make the decision, what does that say to you?
Well, technically that's right. It's up to the Attorney General whether to bring a criminal case, but the Attorney General won't do that unless he has the facts in front of him. And how are the facts going to get in front of him if there's not some kind of commission or 9/11 commission type thing to open it up?
What about this 2004 report when it comes out?
Well, that's a possibility. I just don't.
She laughs.
I think politically right now this is kind of a moot issue. There is one of the sleeping, sleeper subjects going on though is that the Senate Intelligence Committee under Dianne Feinstein is actually doing a kind of quiet inquiry into the torture program. And it is possible that they will, at the end of the day, come out with some kind of statement or a public report even about what went wrong. So she's looking at it.
Okay,
she's
so
working on it.
We're in California. You can write Dianne Feinstein and tell her that you approve of this.
Definitely.
Let me ask about the stuff that's going on in foreign lands, but Italy, Spain, and these sorts of things that are, you know what I'm talking about. In Italy, 2 CIA officers are on trial in absentia for participating in the 2003 rendition. Spain has done that thing they did with Pinochet, and now they're saying they're doing it with us. What's the status of those?
Well, this is what I mean by when I say it's not going away. There's part of the Convention Against Torture, which America has signed along with most of our allies and most of the civilized world. In fact, there's an aspect of it which says that if there are allegations of torture, any signatory has a responsibility to investigate. And generally what they want is the country where the torture took place to take a look at it. And so the U.S. actually has an obligation under that convention to do an inquiry. But if the U.S. does not do it, then other signatories are supposed to jump in, and that's what's happened in Spain. They're doing it to put pressure on the U.S. to do its own. But
right.
they've started moving forward. But what they really want is for Obama to open up some kind of investigation. It's two parts. One is to figure out what happened, and the second thing that we're obligated to do is some kind of reparations for people who've been tortured.
Let me just read I thought I had one here. Of people who were tortured, and it's come out. In other words, although without this investigation, can you talk about any of those? Well, before you came on, I mentioned the crucifixion at Abu Ghraib. I mean, and these other, I have here an unnamed detainee under CIA supervision in Afghanistan froze to death after having been chained naked to a concrete floor overnight. The body was buried in an unmarked grave. An Iraqi prisoner named Manandel al-Yamadi died on November 4, 2003 while being interrogated by the CIA at Abu Ghraib. And that's the one where he basically was hung and died of crucifixion through asphyxiation. A third prisoner died after an interrogation in which a CIA officer participated, though the officer evidently did not cause the death, etc., etc.
Right. There have been actual homicides in this case. We know of three
prosecutions?
Deaths. No prosecutions, no charges even. And we know who was in the room when that man was, as they said, the medical examiner said crucified. I've published his name in my book and in the stories in the New Yorker. Yet the case was sent to the Justice Department during the Bush years. No charges were ever brought. It's remarkable because you compare the CIA to the military. The military has actually had trials and convictions. They're mostly of lower level people, but just the same, they've had a legal process and some kind of accountability, and then they also do reports afterwards to sort of learn lessons. But at the CIA, there have been no charges and no process like that.
Let me just, for people who haven't read The Dark Side yet, this is going to be a big question, but who knew what when? Who initiated what when?
Well, some of this is why we still need to know more, because it's hard to tell exactly. But right after 9/11, you can see clearly that the CIA was authorized by the Bush White House, basically President Bush, and Cheney was a major instigator here, to go beyond limits that had been placed on the CIA before. They could set up teams of paramilitary units that could rove the world looking for terrorist suspects, and they could either kill them or capture them and interrogate them and hold on to them, detain them in prisons that the CIA set up itself. In the past, the CIA had never really interrogated people or held them in their own prisons. They'd never had prisons. So this was kind of a new role for the CIA, and it jumped in. It's hard to see whether they were pushed in or they jumped in. And
right. In other words, even there's these ones where was someone at the top pushing them? I mean, Cheney at one point says they wanted to do it, and yet there are other places that clearly he's contradicted in that.
Right. I mean, Cheney's tried to say, well, we just gave them authorization to do what they wanted to do. The CIA has said quite the opposite. Panetta, when I interviewed him, said that the CIA was pushed to do this by an unwise White House. I asked John Helgerson, the former Inspector General.
The one who's done the 2004 report, which we have yet to see.
Just recently. I think it's the first interview he's ever done. And I said, so who pushed whom? And he said they went into it arm in arm.
Okay.
So I think that's probably the most accurate view of the whole thing.
And finally, in a minute or so, what's happening right now in the Obama administration with regard to military tribunals and detainee detentions?
Well, I think there's quite a battle going on internally where and before just criticizing Obama, I think it's only fair to say in the first week he took office, he abolished torture, he closed down the black sites that the CIA had, he reestablished the commitment to the Geneva Conventions. He's really made great strides to bring the country back into the rule of law and into a champion of human rights. But they've still got Bush's problem of what to do with these people in Guantanamo whose rights were so violated. It's very hard to know how to put them on trial. It shows you what a disaster this program was.
In other words, what you're saying is that by the way they treated them, they have made the ability to now revert to sound legal process very, very difficult.
Completely. It's a total mess that Obama's inherited. So I have a certain amount of, sympathy for him, but they're trying to figure their way out without damaging the U.S. legal system.
Okay. Again, the book is The Dark Side, the inside story of how the war on terror turned into war on American ideals. And it's just out in paperback. Jane Mayer will be at the Central Library tonight at 5th and Flower. It's sold out, but some people get in if they go in the waiting line. You can listen to this week's conversation and many others by linking to the podcast. Email me at temcnally@mac.com, temcnally@mac.com to find out how to get to the podcast, how to get to my site, how to get on my weekly list, where I will send you an email and tell you who's going to be on and what we're going to talk about. Thank you, Jane Mayer. Keep up the good work. Next week, by the way, before I let you go, next week we will have the filmmaker and one of the principals from the film Reckoning about the International Criminal Court. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks so much.